Where are you going live? Okay, there we
Onto
go.
YouTube,
Onto YouTube.
and then I'll record here. Yeah, so it is
We're
there.
live.
The picture says so. That's all.
Where are you going live? Onto YouTube.
And what is that feedback?
And now I got feedback. Hold on. Let me mute it. You'd think I have some skill at this soon, someday. Okay, we're live on YouTube and we're here. We found it. Yay for us.
Yay.
Thanks, y'all. I really thought I had my act together.
It's fine.
That's
We're
another
here.
day.
We made it.
We made it. We have important things to talk about today, of course. So I think somebody needs to ground somebody. All right, that's Isela. You need to ground Christy. Let me be specific.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I've been, when we're juggling a lot of projects, and which is what I've been doing recently, is sort of juggling balls in the air. And then there are some things that I think in terms of just what's happening within the projects, outside of the projects, this level of connection, or the level of intensity, or the level of how passionate we are about certain things. And then there's those things that, just they have to get done. It's like balancing all of those things can sometimes feel very overwhelming. And I think that the same thing within me that kind of kicks me into overdrive also is when we have these very passionate types of conversations, that kicks us into this overdrive because we are so emotionally connected, or we are so passionate about, creating. For me, it's a ripple effect. It's the ripple. It's knowing that, I show up, and I show up with an intended purpose. And my passion comes through with the hope that somebody will think differently, have an idea spark, look within themselves. I mean, it's going to look different for every person. But I've been in that place of just juggling a lot of balls recently. And one of the things that I do when there's a disconnect sometimes, because again, things have to get done, and then there are things I'm passionate about. It's juggling those two very distinct things for me. I have a mantra that I use.
Okay.
I have a mantra that when I take that breath, it allows me to just get refocused to what's important to me. And that mantra, I think, is going to be dependent on who you are and what's important to you. My mantra, just giving my past life experiences and just where I am, it's always, I am love. That for me, and if some folks can't say that yet, and so initially I couldn't say, I said I am loved. I am loved. And then I moved into I am love. And that when I can get into that place of just that connect with that centering myself, that I am love, and all that I do and all that I see, I step into that experience of love. And it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to look a certain way to please you. It doesn't have to look a certain way to, be accepted. It just is. I am love, and the way that I step into it is going to be unique to who I am. And so just thinking for a moment of what you can lean into when you're starting to feel whatever it is you're feeling. What is your mantra? What is the thing that you can hold tight to center yourself? I'm sitting here with my hands on my chest, but you can't see it. That's what I do, is I hold here, hold my own space, and lean into that.
And this will segue into one agreement we want to discuss today, Ijuma. My feeling when you were talking, Isela, was a sense of urgency. That's where I slip into super quickly. Whenever I see something on social media that I don't agree with, when I look at my to-do list, when I read someone's email, I have this sense of needing to take action before I have centered. And so even as you were talking, I was just like, oh, I wanted to resolve it quickly. Does that I know that comes from my whiteness. So Ijuma, how do you take from that grounding and that pausing long enough to notice and to say that beautiful phrase, I am love? How does that bring us to an agreement that we might need to keep in the forefront of our mind today as we talk about white rage, to be quite honest as well?
Mhm. What I have to offer might seem like to be the opposite,
Okay.
but thinking about holding our space and knowing for ourselves that I am love, and thinking about what we want to face is that fear of conflict,
Mm.
right? So this conversation is going to be about the conflict that groups of people are having inside themselves and out in community, but we can't fear that. And we can't think about when we bring up oppression and things that are inequitable, that we're doing it, actually doing it from a place of love. Like, and it's just not like a feeling, it's actually love in action, right? Holding people accountable and actually trying to work through the conflict.
And I think if we can see it from that lens, that this is an act of love, right? Because there's all of us have a history of how we feel about conflict. All of us have, whether we're threatened by it, where we lean into it, we're comfortable or confident. My experience in early childhood education is folks run the other way. Mm-hmm. And all this passive aggressive stuff flies all in every which direction.
Yeah.
That we're not taught how to be assertive. And in our assertion comes even more conflict because folks are uncomfortable with that. They're uncomfortable with my ability, my willingness to say what I think and feel. Folks don't know what to do with that. And then there's that whole piece of, make everybody feel happy.
Right.
We don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. And so it is an act of love. This work is an act of love. So keeping that in our lens, even in our own discomfort, especially in our own discomfort, I think is such a critical part of this work.
Oh my gosh, that gave me 800 questions. So let's just start with, I think everyone taking just a second to notice and answer that question, like how comfortable are you with conflict? How do you define conflict? Ijuma, it was making me think about the video you shared on Black News, I believe was the broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get his name in a minute. The white, I don't really know what he is. I was going to say scholar, but I think that was too generous.
I think he's just a politician.
Just a politician. That might be more accurate. Okay, thank you, Ijuma. And I felt that the news broadcaster was very generous to his host and did not push things to a point of conflict. So I know I'm jumping far into the future, but I want to come back to that about how have we created cultures where you can't push people outside of their comfort, or you're seen as mean or disruptive or rude. So I just kind of wanted to plant that, because as I was watching that whole conversation, I wanted the broadcaster to say, you haven't answered the question, or and he just sort of like went to the next question. Do you know what I mean by that? Okay. So anyway, really wanted just folks to think about what they mean by conflict and where they shy away from it. Do one of you want to sort of situate what you think we're talking about today and how it came upon your radar, knowing that for some of you, both of you, it's been on your radar a lot longer than some of the rest of us?
I want to start because I live in a school district that I've actually worked with off and on for several years. And they have recently, there have been lots of conversation within the district. Now, I haven't been working with them about this specifically, their initiatives right now. I haven't done any of that work. My work was really around trauma and how to support children and shift their approach, because they were using a reward punishment model and they really wanted to kind of let that go. So that was my initial work with them. And but what has happened is that they have created an equity plan. They're really looking at making some significant changes within the district. Well, there's a particular board member who is very upset about this and is kind of bringing the parents involved. And so now it's become this crazy, like every board meeting is like it's just crazy how angry people are around the idea of being inclusive of critical race theory, and that they believe that they have a hidden agenda. The families that have come together with this particular board member, that there's a hidden agenda behind it, and there's a lot of pushback about having any of this. Anything around equity and race, and I mean, there's not even a willingness to have a conversation about what this really means. And so when I started watching this, and then just having connections with people that I know within the district, I realized that it was also happening at the high school within our district. And then I realized as I started to research this that it's happening everywhere, that this pushback, that schools that are, and we're talking elementary schools, public schools, that are really making an effort to go, okay, we have a problem here. And we recognize the problem, and the pushback that's happening is making it very difficult for them to move forward. So that's kind of what jumped on my radar. And the other little piece too that I want us to kind of think about, or at least have a discussion about, Dr. Eva Shivers said something at a session a couple weeks ago that I watched, and she was saying something like, she said, like, historically making these big systemic changes to really address equity and inclusion, and like that hasn't been done like at such a grand in school districts, because school districts have been running in the same way that they've and organizations, and and she's like, so we're kind of figuring it out as we go. And so it's something that I'd like to at least have a conversation around. What do people do when they're wanting to make a concerted effort, when they're like, where do they start? What do they do organizationally to start to create that dynamic shift?
So you said part of the phrase, Isela, and the theme about critical race theory. It could be any fill in the blank, but today we're using critical race theory as the distractor from the systemic change that people are seeking. And Ijuma, do you want to talk a little bit about, because I know that just given your work with Megan and even the webinar you all did the other day, this has been, and when I first met you as my coach, you said, read Critical Race Theory, the one with the red cover, blah, blah, blah. And, so maybe you can orient us a little bit too, and then we'll get into why is this the distractor or the go-to of white rage? As Isela said, what do we do as teachers and educators who want to persist, but are now getting all this pushback against an idea that isn't even the problem, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So just like, I think, like, to be clear, that critical race theory is just used as a dog whistle. Because over and over again, the people that are railing against it actually don't know what critical race theory is. And their problem actually is that they want to keep the status quo, where we don't talk about racism, that we don't talk about the systemic racist problem that we have within our school district, in our educational systems, that they don't want any of it. They want us to go back to our colorblind philosophy. Right. One of the rally calls, and just in what Isela sent, is that, we want equality, not equity. And like, that's actually not a thing, because we're starting from a place of inequity.
Right.
Like, it's already there. And so that again is just a distraction. And it's not, and I think it's also important to know, like, this is a political move, and that it's very highly organized and deliberate, because they don't want us to move away from the status quo where people are being oppressed. Like, they want us to stay in our oppression. But But I think what is also happening is that school districts are just getting to a point where, oh, okay, maybe we have something is wrong, and they're just at the beginning state. But a lot of them are making the shift of like just not trying to look racist instead of actually not being racist, right? Like they're very upset about the pushback, about the high emotions. But you're gonna get that. Like you have to know that when you stand up and say, "Hey, this system is wrong. We need to change it." People are gonna have something to say about it. But that doesn't mean you don't do it. Because that's what's happening.
Are you sure, Ujima?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But that's where we are, because systemically, like we don't want to let go of the power, right? Like we're afraid of losing the way it was, because the way it was fine for the dominant culture, was fine for the dominant people. So they're like, why do we need change? Why do we need change? Like, and we already gave you a lot of stuff already, right? Like we have our multicultural day. Like we gave you, like we've given you
Black
stuff,
History
right? We
Month.
let you come to our school.
MLK Day off. Like,
right?
what else do you people want? May I draw a parallel quickly and see if I'm kind of understanding where we are right now? For example, let's say I'm a public school system and I notice, even if it's not about race, I think sometimes disability is like less volatile because it conceivably impacts fewer people, or it's not as harmful. Like we don't go around saying you're an ableist. I don't know why.
We should.
We should. Myself included.
No, we really shouldn't. We shouldn't name call.
No, we shouldn't name call, but we should be aware that we are acting as an ableist.
Yes.
But if I'm a public school and if I keep the status quo, then I've got enough people coming to my school because of how school is funded. If I start now saying we're going to be more inclusive, families with means might go to a private school. Now I might lose funding. So I feel like it's all the way from losing that power to all the way to this is uncomfortable because every board meeting is a knockout, drag out fight. So I just wanted to, like, I feel it's all of those places about where we were being served as a public school system under the status quo. Even if your heart and mind says, I believe in equity, you still want the money, those dollars, those students bring in. Does that,
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because we don't want to have a conversation about that's still part of the system that's inequitable.
Right.
Like it wouldn't be a problem if we weren't funded by bodies and time, right? If we let that go and just fully funded school because we need education in schools, that wouldn't be a problem. And so part of the work is to change that system, because we can't let, like, that's a classist reason to let people that have resources and means above and beyond what the state gives to hold us hostage and not actually have equity. So like that's the work that we have to do. And that can't be just your excuse. Like, so we stay oppressed, because that's actually what the ask is.
Okay.
And you're prioritizing people that actually don't want equity. Like they're saying, like, no, we want the status quo. Mm-hmm. And even though like that status quo is harming and oppressing children.
Right. But it's not my kid.
Maybe. It actually is. And those people are still saying like, oh no, we keep the status quo. Because like we get into some intergroup dynamics about respectability and assimilation. Like, oh no, I need the status quo because like I've been building my kid up to assimilate into this dominant culture. And if we don't have that, then my kid's never gonna get into Harvard.
That's the thing that I find very fascinating, because I live in a very diverse area, suburb of Phoenix. So I live in the West Valley, which, I mean, in my street alone, we are super diverse. It was one of the reasons why we decided to stay on this side of town. And the pushback, a lot of the families who are going on television to fight this are brown folks.
Mm.
That's what I find so incredibly fascinating. And I get, when I'm listening to them talk, the misconception, right? Like, people think they know what they're talking about, but they really don't.
Yep.
They're kind of getting bits and pieces and jumping on that. And two of the things that I want to put out there, because this is what I'm not only hearing here, like in the things that are happening where I am, but I'm seeing it online. I'm seeing it in schools, in other webinars that people are having these conversations. So I want to put this out there. One of them is, if you talk about race, white children will feel bad
Yeah.
about being white. Okay? And the second one is that black and brown children, so this particular district, and I think others, as I've gone and I've looked at what other folks are putting together as a plan, because they've been really interested in seeing, like, what does this look like for different areas, different schools. You know, I've just been curious about it. So one of the things that comes up is the rate of suspension, right?
Mm-hmm.
So black
Right.
and brown children being suspended, particularly our black and brown boys, and then we look at, you know, our black boys. And so this particular district addressed that as well. We're going to track that, okay? So one of the things that the families that are on TV saying that, you know, this is a horrible thing that's going to happen, because children, black and brown children, will not be held accountable for their behaviors.
Yeah.
So those are two big ones that I see flying everywhere. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know the folks that are in this district are going to be watching this video. So let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
Where do you want us to start?
The first one about the white kids feeling bad about being white.
So,
And be racist.
you know, I've been in this field a long time. More like my whole adult life. And I've always talked to children of all races about racism, about white privilege, about whiteness. And my basic understanding and belief is that they're not too young to talk about it. And talking about racism, that it might be that, like, children might express worry and concern about it, but they haven't yet internalized it. And also, you want them to, like, express that and talk them through that. Because if you don't do it, because then we get these adults in our adult forums that are still in the same place. Like, they're worried about, oh, am I a bad person? But with young children, we can, just like we talk with adults, we can talk about that it's not about good and bad. We can move out of that good and bad binary. Right? That even though we might be complicit, we might be a part of it unconsciously. But once we start to talk about it, then you know, and you can make a decision. And 99% of the time, people make a decision for equity. People make a decision for anti-racism, right? Children make the decision like, oh, I'm gonna speak up about this. I'm not gonna let my friend be excluded from play. Like, if she's black, she can be the princess if she wants to. If he's black, if he's brown, he can be the princess if he wants to, right? So starting there actually moves us forward in getting to the equitable, inclusive world that we say that we want.
Okay, so I want to go back and say something about what you said early on when you started talking. And I just want to put this out there, that young children notice race very early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know I'm saying that, the three of us know that, but there are a lot of folks who really, it's that color blindness, right? It's like,
Yep.
but they notice very early on. And so ignoring it is our issue. That's about us and our own discomfort. And really, if we just, like you said, had these conversations with them and ask what they know, what they're seeing, what can we do? It really isn't a threatening experience. The threat is within us.
Yep.
And Isela, that's exactly what I was thinking about when Ijuma said that children haven't internalized it yet. We, all of us that are getting on TV or writing letters to our superintendents or being quiet out of fear are adults. And we have already decades of internalizing the binary. And you can take any ism, right? Racism, sexism, ableism, classism, all of those, and just water it down to going through the grocery store with your caregiver and noticing a difference about another human. If in that society, that difference is derogatory, negative, shameful, your mother, your grandmother, your father hushed you. And you learned from so early on to ignore it, to avoid it, to not talk about it, to make fun of it, to exclude it, whatever was your go-to to process that emotion. And so I feel like what people are doing is projecting adult internalization of things they haven't processed onto children and even students, and their own inability. We started off with conflict of how would I talk to a 14-year-old who now does feel a little bit like I got some privilege and I haven't done anything good about it. Yeah. How do I talk about that? So you're onto something here where the adults are outside of their comfort. They're internalizing and projecting, and they may not feel like they have the skills of what to do when their child comes home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry,
and so it's not like we don't want children not to say it, right? We want children to talk about their feelings and to be honest and open. And so it's not wrong that a white child comes home and say, I really feel bad about being white.
Yeah.
Because I learned about this particular truth. And like, I feel bad about that. And it is the adult's role and responsibility to reassure them and talk to them through that, to help them process that. But it is our own, as adults, like the royal we, like adults have a hard time because we haven't had that experience. The three of us, we've been in these conversations for a long time. We've had lots of practice. Most people, because the narrative and the default is not to talk about it. It's the hush. Hush is the default. So then when it comes back to us, we don't know. And so what we do know is to continue to hush. And so we get other people to hush about it too.
It's interesting because it's not just, for me anyway, my observations is that it's not just a hush. It's more than that. It's like, I don't even see it. and we've talked about this where folks are proud that I don't even see it. And I think that bringing it to surface is really, it's triggering for people. I find it interesting, though. Again, I'm going to go back to people of color. So Black, Indigenous people of color, when they are responding against this idea of equity, I think it's something that we really need to start to have conversations about.
Yeah, because it's internal, like that's internalized oppression.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're working very hard to align ourselves with whiteness. Because there's a benefit in our current society. There's a benefit of assimilation. There's a benefit of respectability and aligning ourselves to whiteness. We follow the dominant rules. I've worked really hard, right? I've worked really hard. Like, look at my house, look at my kids, look at my spouse, like look at my car. Like I follow these rules.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna tell me that wasn't right. And actually, I'm not going to tell you, get yours, get that bag. But what I'm saying is that you can't What I'm saying is that it is oppressive, and it's not the only way. And it can't be the only way, because that only way is limiting.
Yeah.
That only way is oppressive.
Yep. And it's harmful to our children.
Absolutely.
Our children. And
It's
I think we're
absolutely
so
harmful.
accustomed to looking at through that lens that we're unaware. I think people of color, like sending our children to school and seeing what's happening within the school system, because we're so accustomed to seeing it,
Right.
we don't even question it.
Right. And a lot of families tell the children, just suck it up and make and try to live through it, because it'll be worth it when you get into that school, or it'll be worth it when you make those connections to get that job. But is it?
Yep.
But is it? Right? Is it worth the trauma? Like, because that's the real trauma. Like, that white fear and rage is just hurt feelings. But to go through and to try to assimilate through a system that's not built for you is the real trauma.
Right.
So even if you get all those material goods, you might be very broken on the inside.
Right.
And that's not what we want. And we don't have to have that. We don't have to take those licks. We can have a different way. We can have a different system. And people are just we're just at the beginning. School districts are taking tiny steps, micro steps towards equity. And then people are just falling apart.
Micro steps is the truth.
It's like
Well,
people
I
are
was
falling
Barely
apart,
having conversations.
right?
We
Yeah.
haven't done the work yet.
No, and I would say it's even performative tiny steps. Like
Yep.
all the rage to have this policy that we didn't think anybody was ever going to read and we weren't going to do anything about it. Somebody found it on the internet and now we're all in trouble. And it's like now you have to defend something that you hadn't maybe even thought through because you were just putting the E word into a document.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that to be a criticism against school districts. I just recognize the amount of work to really understand what these nuances are and what they mean.
Right.
I also think, Isala, when you were saying like, it's surprising that some of the brown members of your community are maybe the staunchest voices in this moment against the movement towards equity. And I think that we have to reiterate that everybody is human. So we all are going to operate from fears and discomfort. And then you layer that with what Ijuma said, the amount of trauma that those families, as you know, may have experienced just from trying to survive in this culture. How do we expect them to have a prefrontal cortex that, the lid's on, right? It's like the threats are real.
And there's no judgment.
You're
Like,
right.
I understand survival, and I understand that people did the best they could, right? And it got us a little bit further, but we don't have to keep going with that. Like we don't. And I fault no one that a lot of that assimilation and because of the people that came before me and my own family.
Yeah.
And the racism that they had to endure allows me just to be in the place that I am.
Right.
So I'm not discounting. I have no judgment. Like, I know that people did it to survive, so I could be here. And so the next generation can be here. And I'm saying that I'm taking that on and saying that, and I can do it a different way. We can do it a different way.
And when I
And
say
so, and historically also, what we know is that when, like, this isn't new.
right.
Like in California, about like any English only legislation has always been supported by the people that it hurts the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's
follow
who
California. We're right behind California.
right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we need to do is to get to reorganize and bring in coalition, so that you don't, like, that can't be the only and good choice to align yourself with whiteness. That we can't organize just like other people organize. We can organize about having inclusive and a education system that works for everyone. That children don't have to give up their essentially who they are, their culture, their language, to be a part of the system.
Right.
And bringing people in and working through those fears of, well, if we don't do it, then what's going to happen? What can happen is whatever we want, right? Systems are people built and people made. So we can, as people, we can build new systems. Like if we let go, like we can create space for something new and something that is actually beneficial for everyone.
I want to layer on that one, Ijuma. I haven't forgotten your second question, Isala. I wrote it down because about being accountable, because I feel like when I say we're humans, it's like we're all going to have a need for safety, satisfaction, and connection. We're all going to fear change in different ways because we all are human, regardless of our identities. So what Ijuma was just saying, one of the pushbacks that I often hear, especially around English language learners and or inclusion from my work, an ability lens, is that the curriculum or the research, always like the research shows that kids do better when you put them in language ELL classes, or the research shows that, or this curriculum says I have to track kids on reading level and put them in a small group by deficit, even though we have all this other research that says forming groups based upon homogeneous deficits is the worst way to group kids, right? So how can we do some pushback when people say, but the research or the curriculum or the best way to support English language learners is to pull them all out into an ELL classroom? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just have to laugh at that because we in Arizona and California, I think until pretty recently, we just ignored the research. So there wasn't even a conversation of research because it was English only. Children, we don't have an ELL system.
You weren't even that good.
We're not even that good. We're not even there. It is English only. End of story. A teacher cannot offer any kind of instructional support in a language other than English. Now they can talk and engage with children socially, but not academically. It has to be done in English only. So there was, and no one said we're following research because there was no research to support that.
No research.
That was a racist decision that our state made. End of story. And it's the same with Tucson. Many years ago, we made national news with Tucson, where they took away every book that was about every book that had a Black, Indigenous person of color affiliated with it out of schools. They were like, we are not reading any kind of cultural studies, anything. That's been in Arizona for a very long time.
Yep. And so I think the other piece around that, and what I bring to my work that people are not happy with, is that part of doing this work is that you have to admit where you were wrong.
Yeah.
Like you have to admit that the system is racist.
Yep.
You have to admit that the tools, the assessment tools, the policies, like all those things are racist, and we have to stop and to move into something different, move into equity and inclusion. But we have to admit that because that's going to help us when the pushback comes. Because if we don't say it, the pushback is then like, oh, well, they might be right.
Right.
Actually, no. Like, because if we said from the beginning that, hey, the system is broken, the system is racist and ableist and sexist, and we're moving away from that, and here's how we're going to do it, then there's always going to be pushback. But at least you can say and start from the place where we actually know what the problem is, and we're dealing with this problem, and we're moving forward in a different way. And so we want everyone to be a part of it. We want the community to be involved, right? Because that benefits everyone. And I think talking more about like, how does this benefit? Like, because it's not true. People are worried about somebody getting extra, but there's no extra when the system is already inequitable. Like if they're worried about services that Black and brown children are gonna get, like they're getting only because the system is inequitable. That's why it can't be equality, because it's not equal. We're not even close to equal. It's inequitable, it's unequal. From the start, it's unequal in research and resources, unequal in test scores, and who
Curriculum, how we're teaching
curriculum, and suspensions, and to think about and to actually look at that and like who's being impacted and who's being harmed. And when we look deeper, like, you know, everybody is like discipline, suspensions, like. We shouldn't have a system where children are getting kicked out of school.
Right. Let's start with that. Let's start there.
Like that's wrong.
The goal shouldn't be let's have fewer.
Right? Children. Like we want all, like you can't say you want all the children.
Yeah.
Like, so going back to what you said at first, Christy, about, oh, we're worried about children going to private schools, but you're not worried about children getting kicked out and suspended? Because you don't make money off of children that aren't in the seats. So make that make sense.
Yeah.
Like we want all the children in the education system that works for them. We want all the children. And we want the system to be equitable. And that's not and there's no compromise because it's already unequal. It's already inequitable. And it's not extra, right? No one's actually getting extra. They're just getting just enough because it's just micro steps. Like they're just getting enough so they can function. So they can at least be in school and not be harmed. We're just doing harm reduction right now.
Oh my God.
And if you're thinking about Black and brown children being held accountable, accountable to what?
That's what I was wondering.
Because like this idea, oh, go ahead, Isela.
No, I know where this comes from. It's the suspension rate. And I mean, it's what you just said. I don't know how many times, and we know that in preschool, children are suspended at a much higher rate, right? Just in general. I don't even understand that, quite honestly. I come from intervention. I'm like, why the hell are you suspending children? I don't even understand that. Like the goal is to, keep children at school to help them feel safe and connected, and to I don't even understand.
But Isela, is that the goal of school for everyone?
No.
I know.
Keep going.
Yes, no, I get that completely. Yeah. But that perception of, they're going to get away with things at a higher rate.
Yes.
To me is such a racist comment.
It is. And it's not a feeling, right? Because I think a lot of times, like, we're getting caught up in white rage and how, like, white people and other people are feeling. But this idea that Black and brown children are not deficits.
Right.
They're not innately bad.
Or broken.
They don't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
They're not a threat. They don't need to be saved.
No.
That we need a system where they start to learn and be in community together to learn how to be sociable and to be pro-social. Because that's why children are with adults. Like that's one of the things that we help them do. But we have to have rules that are actually culturally relevant and culturally responsive and not oppressive. Because a lot of times when you look at what children get suspended for, it's around fit, right? It's around fit.
Right.
Yeah. Or They just do the regular things that children do. They have big emotions in their little bitty bodies, and we want to control it. That's our problem. That's our issues around power and control and compliance.
Yes.
That's what we need to look at. There's nothing wrong with children. There's nothing wrong with Black and brown children, so they can't be in school. School should be a place for every single child. And we need to create systems and create schools and communities where that's the truth all the time. And if someone's having a hard time, we help them. And everyone can be helped and supported because everyone needs that on different levels. And we should be able to do that. And to say that, oh, you're worried about children being held accountable to what? Like you're afraid of these babies. Like you believe that they are evil and bad just because of who they are. And no, like I'm never gonna compromise on that and believe that and have anything in policy that says like that's okay. Like no.
But let's go.
Like if we have systems that work for children, then that's not a problem. Like why are you even concerned about that? Go ahead, Christy. Let me sip my water.
No, you sip your water, girlfriend. But you know how you were just saying, like, never have a policy, blah, blah, blah. Well, look at our classroom rules and all the way up to dress code. I have had more districts talk to Julie and I about dress code problems right now. And I'm thinking, last I looked, we were just still trying to survive a pandemic. Why are we fussing about dress code? And then it comes down to racist, sexist, right? Because girls are distracting, all this stuff. But let me not get distracted because this critical race theory, and oh my gosh, it's already been almost an hour, but let's stay here for a minute because I feel like I got Isela's request at the beginning was, what do we tell people to do? And what I just heard you say, Ijuma, was you say the system is, fill in the blank, racist, sexist, ableist, all the above, and we're moving away from it, and we're moving forward in a different way, and then it goes from there, and that we're not surprised when there is, whether we call it white rage, discomfort, or distractions in front of us. Can we come back for just a minute, and whoever would like to share their understanding of what critical race theory is, or our best resource, and that may be the recording you did with Megan Ijuma, because
drop that.
There's early educators who understand this is a distraction, but need a little bit more support in understanding how to. And I don't think the debate is what is it and what isn't it. That's another distraction.
Yeah.
But if they can get a little bit of comfort and then move beyond it, that's a lot of request right there to you both.
So I think you don't have to argue with anybody about what critical race theory is or isn't. Like that's not where you should put your energy.
Got it.
Because it's just being used as a dog whistle to not talk about our oppressive systems, our racist systems. Not to talk about the anti-Blackness that's baked into our system. Like that's what it's about, and that's what you can talk to people about. Because the other piece around that is that what people are coming together around is anti-Blackness. So worrying about Black and brown children being held accountable, that's people coming around and organizing around anti-Blackness. Right? That's like, those are the racist things. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the harm that's being done around suspensions and discipline policies. Let's talk about our use of power and compliance. And that comes out of a white dominant power structure. And so part of it is and not distancing ourselves and starting to organize in the same in the way that's needed to make these changes. Because right now, what the pushback does is move us beyond performative action, right? Because that's what people worry about, right? Well, we did the performative action. Why are they saying anything?
Right.
But pushback helps us move beyond that. That's a signal that we're just being performative and we have to do the real thing. So that means being organized, that we study together, that we think together, and we actually take action and make change. So it could be getting supporting people to get on the school board, whoever that decision making body is, and getting people on that. And that's going to take community care, because a lot of times in school just is people that are retired who have time and the resources to like do this free job, right? And they're putting in time to show up, right? So that means that in the community that we have to like support 2 to 4 people and make sure that, you know, their families are fed, that like their errands are still run, they have childcare. Start bringing children to, if it's an issue, start bringing children to the meetings, right?
Yeah.
And having children voices. Because there's a lot of adults running around having a lot to say, but are we talking to children? Where are the children's voices in that? That's something we can organize around. Supporting our high schoolers, our junior high schoolers, our elementary school, our preschoolers, and taking action. Here's the thing, like we're doing, you know, anti-racist, anti-bias education. So here's something that we can take action on. And to let people know that, hey, here's how this benefits me. Having these anti-racist conversations and taking this action benefits me, and here's how. Like, I'm not afraid. I'm not that worried, because, you know, we talked about it. We did these things. Oh, I learned about this. Like, I didn't know before, but I learned. And so bringing children's voices and bringing children together in our organization, in our organizing, to start making change and having them be a part of that policy change and that practice change. Organizing around, like studying together, like watching videos, reading some books together, like doing that. So like thinking about ways that we can organize, and, you know, people like to make signs, make some signs and go to the board meeting, right? Like do some social media stuff. Like make some TikToks, whatever it is, whatever young children are doing today. But getting the word out there. You don't have to be silent. You don't have to be afraid. And we can go together and be courageous and say, hey, actually, no, we don't want this. And organizing like that intra-group work and organizing ourselves and thinking about the price of assimilation, the price of respectability. Like, what are we going to do about that? How do we start to let go of this internalized oppression that we've used to survive? How can we move from surviving to thriving? You know, that little catchphrase, people, right? Okay. How can we actually live our best and full lives that doesn't require us to silence and make ourselves small? How can we can be unapologetically who we are in our full identity and have full participation in our communities, in our education system?
I think that really requires, as I'm listening to you, I think of like if I was an administrator of a program, of a school, because I've been in that role a couple times, and thinking about, okay, so what does this look like in action? You know, what's this practice, and how do I step into it and stay true to it. That's the other part of this, because then again it becomes performative, right? We jump on the bandwagon. We're like, okay, we're going to do these great things, and then something else comes up, and it falls by the wayside. We had good intentions. But how do we hold each other accountable so that it is sustainable, and that we remember what it is that are what the goals are for us, what we hope to accomplish through this experience, right? What is it? And I don't mean like goals like there's an end game, because there isn't, but that we are moving in the direction that we need to move in so that there is more equity. And so I think that, and it's going to look different, right? It's going to look different everywhere you go. Every school is going to look different. And this is one of the things that worries me. I think it happens in every, when we're talking about supporting children's social and emotional development. Oh, these are the things that we need to do. So we're going to make a curriculum. We're going to do a check sheet. We're going to do an assessment. We're going to do all of these things to make sure that every teacher is engaging in this particular way. And so my fear is that here comes the checklist. Here comes the, like this, we're going to try to create a system that really isn't authentic or real. It's performative.
Yeah.
And it's that box to check to say that we did that work.
And so the thing is that we know that part of having a new system is that we actually do different practices, and that we want it to look different because it's actually responding to the needs of the particular community. And so if it's not looking different, if it becomes standardized, know that standardization is oppressive. So we know that from the beginning, that we're going to move to something that's actually meeting all the community members' needs. And so that's going to look different when you move from community to community. We will never be we're not going to do standardized. So that's going to be sad for people that make a lot of money through assessments.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, a historical approach. It just, especially in the public schools, the K up, it's a historical approach. Buy the package.
Yep.
Have a PD on it in service. We're going to do a mid-year PD to see where we're at. We're going to assess it on the back end of the school year, make goals for the next year. End of story. We did it. So
that has to be looked at, right? That we have to do PD, we have to do community engagement, we have to do family relationships, we have to do it all differently.
Yeah.
But it's not like an unknown. There are communities that are actually doing this, right? And just in the article that you sent, Isela, that there are people actually doing the work, right? They need our support. They need support and more people coming together and coming around them to do the work. And that's where the ideas are going to come from. And so knowing that what other people are doing and checking ourselves that we're not moving to standardization, that we're moving to something that's more, I don't want to say individualized, but more community focused.
Yeah.
And that's actually, and we're checking ourselves and being accountable that it's meeting all needs. And those needs are going to change, because that, like, people are like, oh, we did it. Like, it's continual work, right? And next year is going to be something different because people will have different needs.
Yep.
So maybe where we could wrap this up for now.
Please wrap it up.
I want to, no, I think this is so important that if you're an administrator or a teacher leader who's like, this is happening in my state, or this is happening in my district, or this is happening in my school building, wherever you are, a couple of things I heard y'all say. Don't get distracted by the dog whistle. So don't feel like you have to now become a expert on critical race theory. Wouldn't hurt you to understand what it is, at least at a base level, because it's part of our work, especially those of us who are white, to do some of our dismantling work. It's a good place for us to learn, but it's not so that now I can counter that argument. That's one thing I heard.
Yes.
Another thing I heard was watch out for anything that's standardized or anything that comes with a checklist or a package, myself included, if I'm part of the PD package be wary. Is it a one size fits all? Is it checklist, step 1, step 2, step 3, and we'll be done and out the door by May? Because standardization, I heard, equals oppression. If folks are worried about that a new policy or a new way forward will not hold folks accountable, we ask ourselves, accountable to what? There's each of these is like, go one more step, don't get stuck on the dog whistle, go one more step in and go, accountable to what? And if that is broken or flawed or racist, ableist, then center your narrative there instead of the fear. And then if you're feeling like folks are discomforted or white children are feeling guilty and shamed and harmed, then it's still on us to allow those emotions to be processed and to have those difficult conversations, not to avoid and shush it.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear that hurt feelings are not harm. Discomfort is not harm. Those are two different things.
Thank you. Thank you.
White children aren't being harmed by the system in the way that Black, brown, indigenous children are being harmed. The system is made for them.
Right.
So they're experiencing discomfort, but that's not the end of the world.
Yep. And
that discomfort can be talked through, and and you might actually not get the comfort. Right? You might feel just a little bit more not discomfort. You might move a step out of feeling discomfort.
Say to these leaders and these even families, like Isela, when you're talking, I was thinking about, health and well-being of our educators and being literally and figuratively beat down and feeling like their only option is to disengage because they're just getting beat up so badly. How do we encourage them? I heard you talk about coming to community and so forth, but is there anything you would leave folks with about to keep their own stamina up for the long haul in this?
For me, I think the idea of community, kind of expanding of what that would look like for me.
Okay.
For me, community is about connection, and I would be really intentional as an administrator. My goal was 80-20, and so 80% of my day was spent in classrooms. So 80% of my day, and it didn't matter like what I had on my to-do list, it's like 80% had to be connecting with families, connecting with children, connecting with teachers. And that I wanted them to feel supported, and that they aren't, it's like we're figuring this out together. And I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm not asking you to be able to articulate from critical race theory and know that like the back of your hand. I'm asking you just to show up in your truest, most authentic self, and collectively we're gonna work together to figure this out. But that means I have to make myself seen, and I have to make myself available. And in doing that, what happens is pretty remarkable, because in doing that I create sort of a culture, a climate, and other people will start to do it for one another. And it's the parallel process too. We start to see that in the classrooms. So we create a climate of connection, I think, and authenticity of who we are, and inclusivity when we do it at the truest level. And so for me, that's my first go-to, is I'm not asking you to change all your practices tomorrow. I'm saying be willing, be open and willing, and I'm here to support you through the process.
Because we can't do it's not just a one-person job.
Right.
Like it's just not. So we have to be connected and in community with each other. And go back to remembering that we are loved.
Yeah.
And this work is about our deep love for humanity, our deep love for ourselves and each other.
Yep. And I think when we're starting to feel that disequilibrium that we're gonna feel, the discomfort, just go back to that mantra. I am love.
And as needed, I am loved. Right?
Yeah. Yes. This helps me. Like when I can show up and be my full self with the two of you and like have it that consistent and things to look forward. Like I missed not seeing y'all last month,
I know.
right?
Yes.
Like you're my
Yes.
people. And everyone should have that. Everyone should be connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a place that you are loved and you are loved.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. That's a wrap for episode